Good morning, rock stars, and welcome back to day 10 of the. I got really caught up in my head about it being day 10 and immediately fumbled that. Welcome back to day 10 of the 12 days of FMQ FAQ. My name is Holly and Night of String and Story, and it is my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Today, we are going to talk about quilting on quilts with bulky seams, and I am really excited to give you some of my very favorite tips, both in preventing bulky seams in the first place and in dealing with their inevitability by the time we get to the quilting. Before we jump in, I do have a couple of reminders. First of all, if you are here with me live or on the replay, do say hi in the chat, as I see that Alicia and Karen have already done. Good morning, rock stars. I do just want to give a special shout out to my replay folks. Y'all have been taking me really seriously on that and leaving comments on these videos. And I'm really, really thankful. It's fun to get to check those notifications each morning and try to respond to some of those comments. So thank you for doing that both live and on the replay. I do just want to jump into the caption of this video real quick and cover a couple of things. So first of all, you will see a little blurb about what we're going to talk about today. And right under that, you will find a link over to my blog. Now, today's blog post that I am sharing is overarchingly about Bonnie Hunter's frolic pattern. I had the incredible privilege of quilting a frolic top for a rock star named Claire a few years back and wrote a whole blog post about it. So you'll need to scroll down a bit to actually get to the part where I'm talking specifically about bulky seams, but it has got some good content in there that I think you're really going to enjoy reviewing. And if you like Bonnie's patterns, or if you like patterns similar to hers, I have a number of blogs about her patterns. So this will be a really good example of some of the content that I've created that you may find helpful if that is your favorite type of thing to do. Karen, your caps just made my morning. So listen, come in here yelling with joy. I am here for it. I am here for it. Right under that in the captions video, you are going to find an invitation to join me again next week. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break on Saturday and Sunday this week from live videos. We've got an event that we're doing Friday night and then another event Saturday morning. And as we saw last Sunday, I'm not good at being timely after therapy. So we have a video today, tomorrow, and Friday. We will take a break for the weekend, and then we are going to jump back in bright and early Monday morning with the Quilting Plan Challenge. And that'll be taking some of the content we've been going over together during these 12 days and also taking it to the next level as we talk about how do you decide what to quilt where and how do you begin to actually draft that out and then move into the stitching process. All right. So if that sounds intriguing to you, if you struggle with knowing how to actually quilt your quilts, make sure that you click the link in the caption of this video, register with your email so that I can send you that free workbook, and I will see you every day next week as well. All right. Finally, if you have not already, do hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you've already hit that, then I would really appreciate that when our video today is done, copy the link, share it with a friend, post it on your social media, share it in a Facebook group, and let your fellow quilters know how much you've been enjoying this content. Deal? All right. Let's see who is here. I see Alicia, Karen, Kirsten, Jenny, Sandy, Gnome Gato, Leanna, Vaughn, Karen, Jan, Janet, Nancy, Karen, and Renee. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, let me grab my coffee. Let us jump into this. All right, bulky seams. The first thing that I want to make sure that all of you know is that bulky seams are kind of inevitable. They are part of the quilting process, especially if you do more traditional quilts, or if you do a lot of foundation paper piecing, or if you're creating certain shapes. For example, my Aldebaran quilt pattern is made out of nearly equilateral triangles to form large hexagons. And when you have 6 triangle points come together, that seam gets bulky. It's just kind of inevitable. So in case you have any narratives around bulky seams of it means you aren't a good piecer or anything like that, no, bulky seams happen to everyone. We will talk about some ways that we can prevent them a little bit, but I just want to go ahead and set you free from this notion that we can escape them entirely. So we're going to talk about how to make them better. And then we're going to talk about the fact that by the time we get to the quilting, if there are bulky seams, how do we handle that? And how do we make sure that we don't have any issues from those bulky seams? If you're here and you have not yet done a lot of free motion quilting and you have not done free motion quilting on something that has bulky seams, 2 major risks if you're going over a bulky seam. Risk number 1, the more severe one, is a needle break. We do not want that. Remember, free motion quilting means that we're moving in all kinds of directions. So you might hit that needle kind of at the side and catch it on that bulky seam. It's easy to just snap it. We want to try to avoid that. The other thing that's really possible is that because there's so many layers of fabric right there at the bulky seam, is it just creates a lot of friction on your thread. That combined again with the kind of all directional movement can make it really easy to snap our top thread, which is really frustrating. One of the hardest things is to have to pick back out of a really bulky spot on a quilt. So again, we would like to avoid broken things during our quilting process. All right. So I have 3 key tips for you today. The first tip is that back in your piecing process, we do want to make those seams as flat as we can. All right. There's a couple of ways that we can do that. One is just to pay attention to if the pattern you're following has pressing directions. Often pattern writers have done the work for you of actually thinking through, okay, how am I going to construct this later? And is there a way that we can directionally press these seams to eliminate as much bulk as possible? Okay, so pay attention to that and follow that first of all. Second of all, if you know that something is just going to have a lot of fabric piling up, that is when I consider pressing seams open. Pressing seams open is not my default. It is not my favorite, mostly because I inevitably burn my fingers. Like, people think, oh, that makes sense, Holly Ann. You're a free motion quilter. Of course, you don't want to press the seams open because you don't want them to split. I've never really had an issue with seams splitting during the quilting process while I'm free motion quilting. As long as you're quilting with an appropriate density, your quilt is going to hold together just fine. It's more that pressing the seams open, I inevitably burn my fingers, and I don't like that for obvious reasons, okay? But pressing seams open is going to divide the bulk a bit to either side of that seam so that it doesn't pile up so quickly, all right? The other thing you can do during the pressing process is to make use of some pressing tools to actually encourage those fibers at the seams to kind of collapse and flatten out a little bit extra, okay? The most common way that we do this is with starch. This is part of the idea of starch, is it's going to reduce the stretchiness or any bias of our pieces and help those shapes hold, right? But the other thing that it does is because of the moisture in the starch, it actually helps us to press the air out of our fabric. I know it's hard to think of, do I have a piece of fabric handy? Of course not. The quilt's already in, I don't have it. Here we go. I can just reach behind me, right? It's hard to think of a thin little piece of fabric having air in it, right? But it does. All of those spun fibers have air trapped inside of them. And when we press it, we can press some of that air out. And the starch is going to help keep those seams flat as a result. Okay. Another way that we can help flatten those seams is with a clapper. So y'all know we recently had a tiny little run of string and story clappers made. This might actually be the last one. So one of y'all might be the last lucky duck to snag this if this speaks to your soul today. But when I released these, I got a lot of questions of like, what is a clapper and what's it for? And this is a pressing tool. So after you've pressed your seams, and for me, I will press them. And then once the fibers are warm, that's when I add my starch because it's going to help with the absorbency. And then press it again. And then you slap this lovely little block of pine down on top. Okay. And I literally, so you can just kind of drop it on there, right? Because this pine, this one is not particularly heavy. And I kind of like that because I would rather apply the pressure myself than have to lug a heavy clapper around my pressing table, right? So the seam you just pressed, you slap this on and you press down and you apply extra pressure. And what the wood does, you'll notice that clappers are not finished wood. And the reason for that is because a clapper's job is to pull the heat and the moisture out of the fabric as quickly as possible, okay? So that it cools flat and crisp. Ta-da! I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this, and I am 100% sure that there's a good analogy in like candy making or glass blowing of like the value of like quick cooling something to, you know, create a certain effect. But that's essentially what we're doing with this clapper. So anytime I am doing foundation paper piecing or, you know, like making one of Bonnie's patterns that have a frillion pieces, you better believe my clapper is handy. And once I've pressed that seam, added my clapper with a little bit of extra pressure on it, I will then leave it on top of that piece while I begin to iron and starch the next one, just to make sure it pulls all that heat out of the bottom, okay? Now, from this point, we've got, you know, our pieces pieced, we've pressed them, you know, keep in mind, like I said, directionality. Do you want to press it open? If you've never seen that little trick for spinning the seams on a 4 patch, it's life-changing. Using a clapper. Our pieces are done. We've put our top together, and it is time to get to the quilting. How do we deal with a bulky seam once we're already at the quilting stage, right? And there's just inevitable bulk that occurs. All right. Got a few. The first is really unconventional. And this is not one that I use a lot, but it's one that I will use, especially if I'm working on quilting someone else's quilt top, right? Where maybe I didn't have as much control over the pressing process and what didn't feel like a particularly bulky seam when you're just piecing and pressing. By the time it gets under the machine to be quilted, might feel really thick all of a sudden, right? And that is that I literally keep a mallet in my sewing room, and have been known to. And essentially what I'm doing there is I'm pressing any air or extra space out of that joint. It's not ideal, right? And we want to try to avoid having to take a hammer to our quilt. So please see the tips I just gave you about pressing. Beyond that, more conventional methods of dealing with this during the quilting process include a couple of really simple things. First of all, slow down. Slow down, okay? When you know you are quilting a top that has bulky seams, as you approach those bulky seams, slow down. Sometimes I'm really amazed at what my hopping foot can eke its way over if I just give it a second to do the work. All right. Think about this as, if we're climbing a mountain, right? I just went to Seattle, climbed a big old mountain with my bestie. And as you get tired, you slow down. But forward is a pace. All right. And give your machine a second to kind of work its way over that. I've even been known approach a bulky seam, stop, needle down. And I have a knee lift on my machine, right? So I'll just use the knee lift and I'll essentially raise the presser foot up and then lower it again while I'm not stitching. Remember, we don't want to stitch with our presser foot up. It'll completely flood our tension. We talked about that yesterday. Okay. But simply raising it up and setting it down again will sometimes, if this is the bulky seam and here's our foot and we've come right up against it and we're just kind of catching, raising it and lowering it again will sometimes help get it up over that edge so that we can begin to slowly quilt across. Okay. The tricky thing with this is it's often really tempting to really yank on your quilt, and that's going to increase your chances of breaking your thread or breaking your needle, which we don't want to do. Okay. So slowing way down, helping your foot kind of get started to inch up over that. Okay. Um, if you're finding that that's, having a lot of issues or something's really, really bulky, right? When I was quilting last year for the Aurifil Color Builders, all foundation paper pieced animals, there just was no way that I was going to get all those seams flat. I had like 17 pieces of fabric coming in to one place. And so I quilted all of those using a glide foot. Now, this is a very, very flat glide foot. This is designed for the Bernina BSR. One of the other glide feet, I don't know. My other glide foot looks much more like a spoon. It literally looks like someone took, like the picnic, those like little white plastic spoons that are somehow they're the smallest and deepest of the plastic spoons. And for some reason, those are always the one that, Aunt Susie buys when there's gonna be baked beans. And so you get like 3 beans at a time, the ones I'm talking about. The other one, the other foot that I have looks like someone took that spoon, cut the handle off, and drilled a hole in the bottom, right? It's this really deep, clear cup. But the principle of both of these is the same, whether it's with this shallow lip here or with that much deeper cup. It's that when we approach that bulky seam, it's able to glide up and over with a lot more ease. Okay. So we want to start by having good pressing habits and being intentional and purposeful about paying attention to our pressing for the sake of our future quilting self. All right. Once we actually get to the quilt itself, simply being aware of where those bulky seams are so that we can slow down as we approach them will be really, really key. This is one of the things, by the way, that I find really attractive about hand guided quilting, whether that's on a long arm or on a domestic, because computerized quilting, it's a lot harder to kind of navigate some of this, and bulky seams get to be a bit more of a problem. Okay. Um, we want to slow down. We can upgrade our foot if we need to, if we know it's going to be a whole thing. And then the final thing that you can consider is as you head into the quilting plan process, which we'll be talking about next week, do you want to design a quilting plan where you can essentially avoid quilting the bulky seams. And I've definitely been known to do this. I've been known to do things like continuous curves, but kind of skirt the corner a little bit so I don't go fully up on that bulky seam. I've been known to do swirls where that bulky seam, lands between my stitch lines, right? So that I can just go right around it, do meanders where you kind of loop around. And that's super helpful. Okay. So press intentionally, slow down, use an appropriate foot, consider adjusting your quilting plan. All right, 4 key tips there for you. Shelly says, is there a specific name for the foot? My machine does not have a brand name foot that looks like that. I can look for off brand. Glide foot. That went all the way under the table, so I guess I won't be holding it up anymore. A glide foot is a very common name for it. Let me see if I've also heard it called a spoon foot. I'm doing a quick, yeah, spoon or glide seem to be common. This one's metal, cool. Seem to be very common terms. So I would use one of those 2 words, and that should at least get you to where someone knows what you're talking about if you're doing a little bit of digging around. Yeah, great question. I love that. Thanks for appreciating that, Shelly. It's extremely common for me to just drop things on the floor. It's very unfortunate. I get excited and here we go. Any other questions I can answer for y'all about bulky seams? My hope from today is that you feel reassured that you're not the only one dealing with bulky seams and also feel like maybe you have a couple new tools in your tool belt for how to deal with them, Karen says, I have a question too. Is there any foot that fits a necky? The screw is so low so none of my other quilt feet fit it. Oh, I don't know. That's a great question, Karen. Are you in the Quilting Rockstars Facebook group? If you're not, go request to join that. Truly, if you Google Quilting Rockstars Facebook group, it will pop up. It's like the first hit. If you're not already in that group, go request to join. And I would ask in there. We have somewhere around 10,000 quilters in that group. And I think even if you maybe don't get a full answer, you may at least be able to find somebody who knows somebody who would have the answer. So go do that. Sandy, if you register at the link that's in the caption of this video, you will get an email welcoming you, and then you will get an email with the workbook in it. And then you will get an email that introduces me to you. This is over like a couple of days. So they're just like reminders. And then as we begin to send out reminder emails this weekend and replay emails next week, every single one of those will have the workbook in it. So if you've already registered, it has probably already been delivered to your inbox. I think that's the subject line is literally something like open up for the Quilting Plan Challenge workbook. So search your inbox for that. Great question. Any other questions, y'all? This is absolutely wonderful. Well, Rockstars, thank you so much for being with me again today for day 10 of the 12 days of FMQ FAQ. It's been really fun these last couple of weeks to be live together, breaking down some of these key troubleshooting moments on an FMQ journey. As a reminder, in the caption of this video, you will find a link over to my blog that will have more information about everything we talked about today. Finally, if you have not already, do please hit subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you've done that already, I invite you to share this video and other videos from this series with your quilting friends and your quilting Facebook groups and across your social media to help more folks join our amazing Quilting Rockstars community and more folks feel confident starting on their free motion quilting journey. Y'all are incredible. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you tomorrow.